There are many different political parties in the United States, but only two of them have any chance of winning. The Democratic and Republican parties hold almost every single elective office in the United States. So why do we have a two-party system? Is it because voters are satisfied with our two political parties? Absolutely not. Levels of dissatisfaction with the Democratic and Republican parties are at historic high levels. There's one simple reason for our two-party system, and that is the way our nation's election laws are written. In America, we elect our representatives using something called single-member districts. In single-member districts, there's one member per district. So if California has 55 members of the House, it would have 55 districts with one member from each. Because only one person can win in each district, whoever gets the most votes wins. This is what's known as a winner-take-all system. Single-member district systems have a structural advantage to larger parties that hurt smaller parties. Consider this hypothetical example. Imagine a state where 52% of the voters were Democrats and 48% were Republicans. If it so happened that the Democrats got 52% of the vote in every district in the state, they wouldn't win just 52% of the seats, but rather they'd win 100% of the seats. In this example, the Republicans lost by only 4%, but they didn't win any seats at all. This illustrates a structural bias against small parties. It's called the Matthew effect. The Matthew effect describes the relationship between how people vote and how those votes actually translate into seats won. According to the Matthew effect, those parties that win a large percentage of the votes will win an even larger percentage of the seats. And the parties that received a smaller percentage of the vote will receive an even smaller percentage of the seats, magnifying the difference between them. Clinton received only 43% of the popular vote. But because electoral votes are awarded under a winner-take-all system, he got 69% of the electoral vote. To see how this affects small parties, let's consider the Green Party. If the Green Party received 10% of the vote, that would represent millions of Americans. But if they got 10% of the vote, they wouldn't be elected to any offices at all. And this leads to another significant problem for small parties. And that is that small parties keep losing over and over and over again. Over time, this gets very frustrating for the supporters of the party who get tired of voting for a losing cause. Over time, many of these frustrated voters simply stop voting for the small party, making it even more difficult for them. Instead of voting for the party that they like the most, these voters vote instead for the big party that they dislike the least, the one that has the best chance of winning. Political scientists call this strategic voting, and it's a psychological bias against third parties. Although third parties rarely win elections, they certainly can influence election results. For example, third-party candidates Gary Johnson and Jill Stein drew enough votes away from Hillary Clinton to cause her to lose the 2016 presidential election. Many people are unhappy with the two-party system. The good news is there's a simple way to end it. Most European countries use something known as proportional representation. In a system of proportional representation, there's no bias at all. If a party gets 10% of the votes, it gets 10% of the seats. That's why it's called proportional representation. Proportional representation results in multiple parties being represented in government. If America were to adopt such a system, it would fundamentally transform American politics. And unlike many reforms that are proposed today, no constitutional amendment would be required. Each state has the power to decide for itself if it wants to adopt a proportional representational system. However, the chances of the United States ever adopting proportional representation is highly unlikely. That's because the two-party system is one of the few things that the Democratic and Republican parties agree on.